It's football and other F words, the only Titans podcast out there where 50% of the people on the show today are blocked by Jeffrey Simmons. I'm Zach Lyons. You can follow me on Twitter at FWordSpot. He's Mike Herndon, currently blocked by Jeff Simmons. But if you don't have him blocked, you can follow him on Twitter at Mike Herndon NFL. Mike is running for president. If you look at his Twitter feed, it's just filled with controversial political takes. Stick to sports, Mike. I think that's the lesson here.
Yeah.
And also, we are not live on Broadway Sports Media's Twitter account for the first time in a long time because apparently Elon has decided that you have to have a premium account to broadcast live on Twitter. So those cheapos over at Broadway Sports Media need to get a premium account. Mike, you have an article out on paulkarski.com, and it is about measuring the Titans up against some of its peers, position by position, right? I haven't got to read it yet, but I think it was position by position.
But
Go ahead.
Working off of the ESPN top 10 lists that have been coming out for each position and stuff like that. Because I think, not to get too far into it, but from a big picture standpoint, I think those lists are useful in being able to objectively compare the talent on one team's roster to the talent on another team's roster.
Can you remain objective? Because that seems to be the issue with Big Jeff, is that you're not objective. Or maybe you're too objective, I guess I should say, but he thinks it's subjectivity. So maybe it's really a Big Jeff definition issue, but we'll see. Maybe I'm going to probably get us blocked at this point. I've mentioned it so much. Over at secondinbox.com, I have way too many words written about Jamal Adams. In-depth analysis on the signing itself, talking through the injuries, talking about basically everything that Paul Karski wrote on his article was great. So I got done with my article. It took me about 2 days to finish it up. And then I put out a tweet saying, hey, I wrote like 3,600 words on Jamal Adams and blah, blah, blah. And then PK puts out his inside information article about Jamal Adams, which we'll talk about various facets of that today. But it confirmed almost everything inside my article. So it was really, really great to see that I was pretty much spot on with my entire article on Jamal Adams over at secondinbox.com. Of course, we are brought to you by Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Listen, times are tough. It's getting crazy out there. You know what will help put you at ease, let you sleep a little bit better at night? Some freaking alcohol. So go to Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, Tennessee, and drink those blues away at Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Over 50 years in business. It's pretty crazy. I think it gets coming up on 51 years, but over 50 still works. Mike, we're continuing on. Stoney's not with us today, but we're continuing on with our in-depth position by position look at the Tennessee Titans roster. And we were going to do edge, and then Jamal Adams gets signed. And as I've alluded to a couple of times now, all hell breaks loose on Twitter pretty much because it was not the signing that everybody wanted or expected. And it was Jamal Adams. And it happened last Thursday. And my initial reaction is very confusing. And over that 24-hour period, it became less confusing and more like it's low risk, medium reward. Like it started out for me, low risk, low reward. And then you got guys like Sam Phelan at A to Z, a couple of people on the radio saying it's low risk, high reward. And really, the truth is always somewhere in the middle. It's low risk, medium reward. And you went on a tweet storm, as the kids say, just bashing Jamal Adams, the person, just going ham on this signing. Your words is, if you were to translate your words into an action, it was you just vomiting all over your room. And that's how much this move disgusted you. So even though it's only like $1 million, you're basically like they just flushed that $1 million down the drain. People were all up in your mentions. You're supposed to love every move this team makes. Has your stance changed? Did you take some Rolaids, some Tum, maybe some Mylanta, calm your stomach and calm your nerves and say, okay, it's not really the apocalyptic signing that I made it out to be?
It's not. It was not an apocalyptic signing, and I want to do this because I do think this will be useful for the podcast listeners. Because Big Jeff did block me over these tweets, and let me say these are. Let me count how many tweets I actually had about him. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tweets. 5 tweets about Jamal Adams.
Probably 3 too many.
Let's. This was all from the day the signing was announced. I said Titans finally add a veteran linebacker. Just a little poke, a little joke. Nothing harmful there. And honestly, according to PK's information, possibly correct.
Well, according to just his career,
that too.
Really, and I applaud PK for getting all this inside info. But like when you dive into the numbers, it became pretty clear that this guy's gonna be spending a lot of time at linebacker.
All right, and then so next tweet is new Titan safety in quotation marks. And another little poke. Jamal Adams has been banged up a lot recently, missing 29 of his last 51 games. He's also abysmal in coverage. I get that Denard Wilson has history there and helped get the best out of him in New York, but he hasn't been that guy he was there in a long time. Not that bad. All facts, by the way.
In Seattle. In 2020, but I get what you're saying. But we're 3 pokes and 2 tweets, by the way. So
all right, and then legitimately, we would prefer Elijah Molden to be the starter alongside Amani Hooker in parentheses, and maybe that's the plan. Which again sounds like that bad. Probably is.
He probably blocked you before that, though.
Maybe, and then I think this one may be the one that got me blocked. I like a lot of what the Titans have done this offseason, but if they're planning on playing Kenneth Murray, Jack Gibbons, and Jamal Adams in the middle of the defense consistently, it's not going to matter how good the corners are because quarterbacks will never throw it outside. So that's really it. And then the last one was, the NFL Network had a graphic saying Jamal Adams has the most sacks, 21.5, among all defensive backs that are currently active since 2017. And I replied back and said, but also the least amount of sacks of any defensive back since 2021 because he hasn't sacked anybody in 3 years. So those were all the tweets. None of that's blockable, right? I didn't even go into the whole Connor Hughes stuff with the Jets and him taking shots at his wife's appearance and stuff like that over a simple tweet that he had. I didn't even go into all that stuff. I left all that stuff out there and just commented on the player that Jamal Adams is in 2024. And apparently that was enough to upset Jeff Simmons, and he has blocked me. So there it is. That's why I got blocked by Jeff Simmons. One of those 5 tweets really turned the knife for him, and he was done with me.
It's probably I don't know who he follows or whatever, but I'm sure, his first reaction was let him cook or let Rand cook, the new NJ Rob we trust, which I am now supremely worried that this is going to turn into a disaster because we now why do we have to attach a catchphrase to everything? And
do all teams do this, or is it just us?
I have no clue. That'd be a good investigative journalism for an article is how weird and unique are these certain situations to the Titans fan base.
That would be interesting.
I get very worried. And he went on. Did you listen to the Ramon, Kayla, and Will segment where they asked him about this?
I did not. No, I did not listen to that yet.
Well, he called you a piece of shit right on the radio. I had to bleep him and everything. But his thing is I think what it is for Big Jeff is that he's I don't want to get blocked. He's very sensitive and I think he keeps receipts. And maybe if you've badmouthed the Titans, which we both have. I mean, obviously, every media analyst has said something negative about the Titans. That maybe he has a special Mike Herndon folder, and it's just all your negative tweets, and he's just like, I think I've had enough, and I'm just gonna block this dude. I don't need that negative energy in my life. But it's more about him being protective of the locker room in his own way, which. I don't know if he knows this, but just because he blocks you doesn't mean that the entire locker room blocks you. So I don't know. But that was his. And listen, I think sometimes we forget first off, most of these players that are coming in are very young. They're very social media savvy and all this kind of stuff. And they're very, this is an emotional generation of players that are filtering through the NFL. This ain't the bulletin board guys that just brush it off and, say I'm going to hit you in the mouth and stuff like that. These guys get blocked. And listen, I blocked people. You blocked people for various reasons. Maybe nothing as silly as this, but sometimes you're just like, I've kind of had enough of this negative guy in my mentions or on my timeline. I'm going to mute or block him. And so I just think that sometimes we forget that these players are people and these players have dealt with a lot more. But I will say, this was, out of all the things for you to be blocked for, maybe he knew the political comments were coming and all that kind of stuff, but this was not the reason to be blocked. And because really all you did, threw in some pokes, some jabs, some sarcasm, some snark.
A little snark.
Is mainly quote facts, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because everybody's like, well, this must be PK that he's talking about PK. Well, PK is not blocked. And PK actually seemed okay with the signing. The only negative thing he really said was about the health. Other than that, PK was pretty on board with the signing. So was Blake Bedingfield, who he quoted. And I mean, on that day. And he didn't even call Big Jeff smart, or not smart. He didn't even call Big Jeff soft that day either when all this stuff was going on. But you and Stillman, elite company to be with, by the way. You and Stillman are the only media members blocked by Big Jeff so far.
Is that right? Stillman is too? Okay.
Yes. Right. So I think Stillman was before, but if he wasn't, he definitely was then, because that day he went off on Jamal Adams way worse than you. But you and Stillman are just block buddies. That's what you guys are, just block buddies. But let's talk about Jamal Adams. What is, in your opinion, the most annoying theme or narrative that came out of the Jamal Adams signing from either Titans fans or analysts of all sorts?
I think it's the fact that people wanted to say, well, he's just been hurt lately and he'll just go right back to being 2020 Jamal Adams now that he's not injured anymore. And I'm like, look, the guy has had multiple injuries, but also, are you trying to use a justification for why a 28-year-old is going to play like he did when he was 24? Is part of your evidence that he's been injured a lot? Because that's not helping. Like the cumulative effect of injuries and stuff like that is generally not good as you get older in your career. And look, Jamal Adams is only 28. Like, that's not old by any means, even by NFL standards, but he plays the game in a physical way that I think he takes a lot of damage and obviously doles some out too.
So go check Stoney's or go check my timeline, because I retweeted a old clip of Stoney, but Stoney has a clip from the Cincinnati Bengals game where he just rocks Trenton Irwin. I mean, just like fucking lays him out. And Trenton doesn't have the ball. It's a run play.
Yeah, but when you play like that, you take additional damage, right? And so, like, I think his body as a 28-year-old is probably a little older than your average 28-year-old, even your average 28-year-old NFL player or your average, 28-year-old safety. I think he's probably taken more wear and tear over the course of his career than most, just because of the way he plays, which is good. I mean, I like guys that play aggressive. I like stylistically, in theory, a Jamal Adams. I just don't. I mean, I think even if he doesn't cost anything, which he doesn't, which kind of tells you something right there, but he doesn't cost anything. I get that they need depth at that position, stuff like that, but you're still talking about a guy that you're going to have to rely on to be healthy. And he's missed more than half of his games over the last 3 years. So the odds of you getting 17 games out of him are slim to none. So you just hope you can get, enough out of him in the games that he does play, that whenever he's gone, which he will be, the fact that you didn't go get a different cheap safety doesn't come back to bite you,
Yeah, I mean, the Tennessee Titans defense probably plays like 50 or 60 snaps a game or something like that.
Yeah, 60 roughly. Something.
Yeah, and he's going to play 30 of those. And at the end of the day, the injuries do matter because I think you bring up a good point that gets lost in all this. And I wrote about that as well, is that like the injuries history is concerning, not really because of his age, but because of how many seasons he's already been in the league. Like you think of a 28-year-old, your mind automatically doesn't go to he's already played 7 seasons. Like
Right.
that's kind of what's crazy is that he's been in the league a long time now. 2017 is now a long time. It's almost we're getting up to where it's almost 10 years ago. And that's a long time in the NFL, but it's a long time when you play such a physical style of football that benefits and energizes the defense, right? Like he's an energy guy. He's a tone setter. I go back to like when Kenny Vaccaro rocked that New England Patriots guy, whoever caught the ball at the time, I can't remember who it was, at like that first play of the game where Marcus was still starting.
Woodhead, right? No,
I think maybe in Woodhead or someone like that.
Yeah.
James White, maybe.
James White. James White. That's right.
Yeah. He rocked him, and then you knew the Tennessee Titans were winning that game. Like, you just kind of knew that game they were winning because Kenny Vaccaro. And there's those plays at the beginning of the game where you just know you're going to win because of a big defensive play. And it may not even be a fumble or interception or a sack. It may just be a big hit because you know your defense is about to step up big time. And that's what he is. And so I look at it and I go, yeah, the injuries are a concern. And it's just his very physical play style. Like, you got to factor in the longevity of his career thus far, his unique and very physical play style, and the injuries that have piled up over time, where you're not even considering some of the concussions he suffered. I think he's even had a broken digit at some point. And like we got the knee tear, labrum, groin injuries. You know, you got all these things that just pile up, and it doesn't get better. And this last injury was a massive, massive injury. And I don't know if you listened to the OTP podcast or read my article yet, Mike, but he spent 20 weeks in a cast. Not 20 weeks in a cast plus a walking boot at some point. 20 weeks in a cast. That's mentally, emotionally, and physically just insane. I had no clue like that his injury was that bad. And I think there is something to that where and I think that we need to keep that in mind when we talk about his 2024 season or 2023 season, is that is almost I think a year from his injury to when he actually played a game was a year and 20 days, and 20 weeks of that he was immobile. I mean, that's just insane. Like,
that is nuts.
Then, because once you get out and you are able to move, then you got to slowly build back up the strength. You got to slowly get yourself back into shape because you haven't been able to do anything. I mean, he had to get help constantly to use the restroom, to shower, to do anything. So there's times he said he couldn't even sit down by himself. So like, this is how wild that injury was. So I think one of my big things that I came away with was like that right there kind of changed my perspective on his 2023 season, because like, what we talk about with Harold Landry, what we talk about with Bud Dupree and these other guys coming up with injury, it's going to take him time to get better. And he probably came back a little too quick, but that's just what players do sometimes. They come back a little too early and then they re-injure themselves, and he re-injured himself last year with a knee injury. But that is a concern. But I do think that puts his 2023 season in perspective, which also really wasn't as bad as I think what people make it out to be. It just, after his knee injury in week 11, that's when it got really bad. Like that week 12, 13, and 14 was terrible. And I think it's just because of that injury. And they ended up shutting him down for the rest of the season. But those weeks 4 through 10, he wasn't the liability. Now, listen, he didn't play a lot of coverage snaps or anything, but he wasn't the liability that he became in those final 3 weeks. So I'm with you. I look at this Jamal Adams signing. We'll get a little bit more into the details, but I look at this Jamal Adams signing, and I'm like, this is why it's low risk, medium reward. Because I agree with you. Those expecting that he's going to be an All-Pro Pro Bowler, he may get Pro Bowl if he stays healthy by name recognition. You know, maybe not necessarily because of the play. But let's be honest, that's not what the Tennessee Titans paid for. The Tennessee Titans paid for a average to average plus, slightly above average contributor. Because he may not even start. Now, he may start a few games here and there when they're in dime packages or stuff like that. But he's not going to see the amount of snaps that everybody thinks he was going to see when he got signed, because that's what the contract tells you. The contract tells you everything you need to know about Jamal Adams and how the Tennessee Titans view it, correct?
Yeah, I think the contract tells you they think he's a little bit better than Matthew Jackson.
Kosher says no one is thinking Adams will be a Pro Bowler this year. You need to go check out A to Z and Sam Phelan and a couple other people who have said that they high reward.
And people use. I mean, people recognize the name. He used to be a star. All that stuff. They look and they say, "Oh, well, he's just been hurt the last few years. Now he's going to be back to that guy." I definitely don't think he's ever going to be back to that guy. I think most people recognize that like he's not going to be a superstar here, right? Like best case scenario. Because I've even seen people compare him to like Kenny Vaccaro signing and stuff like that. But Kenny Vaccaro was, I believe, a little bit younger when he signed here for one.
I meant to look that up before we came on the air. Actually.
And I also think he was also a better player at the time that he arrived here. He had been a starter with the Saints. He still had more movement ability. And Jamal Adams looks stiff every time I watch him play the last few years. I mean, even with the injury stuff before and after the knee, like all that stuff, he just looks stiff. And that's okay if you're using him in a targeted way, which is what PK's reporting suggested. And I think that's good. That's good. A good sign that they're going to use him and they are aware of his limitations to the point that they're not going to make him the starting safety. Like he's not going to play 60 snaps next to Amani Hooker. It's not going to be like it was with Hooker and Byard, where those two guys are on the field every play. It's going to be Adams comes in, like PK said, maybe in a, big dime as a dime linebacker. Maybe he comes in and he plays like as a big slot in a nickel look against a tight end heavy formation, like 12 personnel from a team. I'll say this. You don't need to play him in that situation if you're going to be playing against a team that has a good tight end, because a good tight end will cook him. And I think that's kind of what that's why my reaction was so negative, is I just don't think there's a lot of value for what he does. Like, he's a thumper. He hits hard, all that stuff, like tone setter. I guess like there's some of that, like, sure.
It's just such a niche role to fill on this team. Yeah. But listen, they do need someone that can rush the passer or has experience at least rushing the passer, because they don't have a lot of those. But I agree with you. That was what's so perplexing to me, is that he's not good in coverage. He's older. He's coming off a lot of injuries, and he can blitz. And Stoney's going to talk about this on Film Friday for Stacking Inboxes. Like, he can blitz and he can cover the flat, and he'll make plays in the run game. It's just such a niche role for one guy to fill that. And granted, and we talked about this a little bit already, it's not going to preclude them from, going out and getting another safety that can fill a bigger role or beat out Elijah Molden. But it's just, I think it's what it is it kind of feels like it's out of order. And I think that's what's kind of got everybody's minds a little wonky, is that like another signing should have came before the Jamal Adams. Like, Jamal Adams shouldn't have been the signing at the first signing for safety. It should have been like someone else. Right. Yeah, like, I think that's really the issue.
I think if you sign Justin Simmons and then Jamal Adams, everyone's excited about it, because Jamal Adams, they know where Jamal Adams slots into that, right? Like, Simmons and Hooker are the guys, and Adams will be a third safety supplemental kind of guy, whatever. And same would go for Quandre Diggs too, right? Like, if they signed Quandre Diggs or Justin Simmons tomorrow, I'd feel a lot better about it, because I think that safety group makes more sense then. Because right now, I think you've got two guys who can't run, and Molden and Adams back there. And then you got Hooker. But you can't just have Hooker play like deep middle all the time. I know Molden can do that a little bit, but Adams cannot do that at all. So, like, you just cannot line up and play those guys together, which is what I was concerned when they signed him. I was concerned that may be the direction that they were going. Now it seems like they understand. Now it's more clear that they understand his limitations and are targeting, a specific role for him, which is good. I don't think. Look, he's not my cup of tea. Like the whole reporter, like doxing the reporter's wife thing, to me, like really rubbed me the wrong way, because I think about what I would feel like if somebody did that to my wife, and I would be fucking livid. And it's a shitty thing for him to do. And so, like, not my favorite guy in the league for sure. But objectively as a player, I think he does some stuff maybe, but I just can't tell you what he's really good at right now. Like he hasn't been a good pass rusher in a while. He's like,
that's not true though. That's not necessarily true.
I mean, he's okay.
Okay,
it's not special.
So the third best pass rush win rate out of all the safeties is not good.
It's
out of every safety last year.
Okay,
third just fine. Third best is just fine. Is that what we're saying?
But he hasn't sacked anybody in 3 years. You would think
an excellent.
I mean, but you would think an excellent pass rusher would have a sack in the last 3 years.
Well, sacks don't really matter for T'Vondre Sweat because he affected the passer a lot. He affected the play a lot. Let me say
different
something.
When you're talking about a 360-pound nose tackle.
Well,
versus a safety
I don't think it's that different for what
Jamal
Adams is. Jamal Adams is what we've been saying, a dime linebacker and a guy that can rush the passer, create plays. And here's where I want to say that to as well, is that when he was weeks 4 through 10 last year, before the second knee injury that sidelined him, and then he came back, they went from a 27th to 31st ranked defense, bottom half, to a top 10 defense. And he was the only change between week 4 and week 10.
That's so subjective, though. Like, who were they playing?
That's fact.
Yeah, but who
were
they playing in that stretch and all that? I mean,
they played the 23rd best quarterback in week 4, Daniel Jones. They played Joe Burrow, who was technically the 20th in week 6 in the EPA CPOE composite rankings. Okay,
and
so
that
was
what I chose. Almost dead Joe
week
Burrow.
6, Joe Burrow. Then Josh Dobbs. Then P.J. Walker and Dorian Taylor-Robinson, Lamar Jackson, Sam Howell, who were 11th and 15th. So let me say this,
I wonder why the defense played good during that
They
stretch.
played Bryce Young weeks 1 through 3. I mean, Bryce Young was terrible. And then Matt Stafford wasn't very good that week 1. And then Jared Goff was the guy at week 2. So I'm just saying,
as long as they play Josh Dobbs, he's going to be just fine. He's going to make them a great defense.
They were actually better quarterbacks of what they faced through weeks 1 through 3. And then they regressed to the mean when he left. They went back down at the end of the year when they faced Jalen Hurts, Ryan Tannehill, Mason Rudolph, and Kyler Murray.
Okay, 3 of those guys are better than any of the quarterbacks that they played during the Adams stretch. Besides Lamar.
Bullshit. But Ryan Tannehill was not better than Sam Howell at that point of the year.
Oh, he was better. He was better.
No, Sam Howell was the 50th best quarterback in the league at that point.
Sam Howell was a turnover machine. Come on.
Week 10, he was 15th in EPA CPOE composite score. Okay. So he was 15th heading into week 10. So he was not as bad when they faced him.
Jamal Adams is not going to make a meaningful difference in the way that this defense plays or performs. I would virtually guarantee it. Okay, he's not going to make any difference.
He will allow you to attack the quarterback in different exotic ways, which is what Denard Wilson has done, and he will allow other players to fill different roles because he's filling that role like that. So, like, I disagree when it comes down to it that he's not going to have an impact on this team because it's clear that he does. It's been clear his whole career that he has had an impact on those around him. He is a force multiplier.
Come really. On. We're going down the Bud Dupree route again here.
Well, the Bud Dupree route was right. I mean, it was true. He wasn't very good, but we still allow whenever Harold Landry was better when Bud Dupree was on the field. It was a fact. Same thing with the other guys. Like, that's just an
Harold Landry was pretty good.
Big Jeff over here. Big Jeff and Big Mike hate facts. Facts do not agree with them.
Hey, Harold Landry was also pretty good last year, but you want to dismiss that, so.
Yeah, he was a great cleanup artist when the play was pretty much over. So that's also a fact, by the way. So I know you hate.
His pass rush win rate was really good though down the stretch. If I look at a specific,
but hey, Jamal Adams' pass rush win rate doesn't matter. Or does it?
Sure. But
Doesn't
no,
matter.
but Harold's doesn't either, right?
Well, I didn't say it didn't matter. You're the one who's
You
saying
did.
that Jamal
You said he
Adams.
sucks. He's just a
No, he
cleanup
does.
artist.
He is a cleanup artist. Okay, so either way, I do think that there is a place for Jamal Adams. And I do think he brings something to the team that they lack, which is I think they lack just leaders. And I know what you said about Jamal Adams off the field and the attacking of Connor Rogers and all that kind of stuff.
That
But
doesn't
he
mean he
does
can't be a
bring
good leader. That just means he's a shitty person, in my opinion.
well, yeah,
But
yeah. But either way, I do think that he brings leadership, knowledge of the system. He has respect from Denard Wilson, and his arguably his best career arc was with Denard Wilson, but that was several years ago. But I bring that up because at least Denard Wilson knows what he's getting into, and I thought was as kind of an interesting little storyline here that hasn't gotten much exposure is that when you go and start researching why safeties are being devalued and they're on the market, there's a bunch of articles, but there was one article by I think it was Jonathan Jones that talks about the distinct viewpoint difference between the staff, the coaching staff, and how they view safeties and how executives / front office makers view safeties. The coaches think they need safeties and really good safety players, and you need to go get me some guys. The execs say, well, look at the information, look at the tape, look at this. We can get away with a day 3 guy at safety, and you just need to coach him up. So I think it's interesting that it was brought up by Jamal Adams that Denard Wilson, and it's been said a couple of times, that Denard Wilson basically said, let's go get Jamal Adams. Let's get Jamal Adams in here. I want him on the team. And then Rain Carthon actually went and did it. And again, it was very easy because it was cheap. But I do think there's something to that whole collaboration, lockstep kind of deal that, I mean, that's a good sign that your general manager is listening to your coaches. And I know that sounds pretty like they should, but there's several instances where around the league where they look at AJ Brown and the AJ Brown trade, right? So, that's just kind of where I'm at. Listen, I don't expect much from Jamal Adams, but I do think when he's on the field, he could be an average contributor. And for a team that's lacking depth, especially in certain packages, they desperately need it. And let's be honest here. The Tennessee Titans ran from the dime package last year, 23% of the time of their defensive plays were from dime. That's a third best mark. Seattle was 12th with 12%. So there's a big difference between even just 12th and 3rd, 23 to 12. But, you look at what the Ravens did last year and what Tampa Bay did last year, because what Todd Bowles did matters more than what really probably Baltimore did. Baltimore ran at 1%. Tampa Bay ran it at 5% dime. So there's not going to be a lot of dime packages and a lot of usage given to Jamal Adams, and the contract reflects that. And this is probably the most that anybody's ever talked. And I think someone said it. Yeah, here you go. Nick Fuchs says, is Adams the most talked about vet minimum deal in NFL this year? Definitely on this show. Definitely on this show.
It's up there.
Parting words before we get to the other players on Jamal Adams. Closing thoughts, arguments to the candidate from Texas.
I hope he is a less than 50% kind of snap count guy for them. And look, there's a spot for him. Is he better than Matthew Jackson and Mike Brown and all these other made up safeties? Sure. Yeah, I agree. He is probably better than all those guys.
Is he better than Cedric Gray and Jack Gibbons and the other linebackers? Because that's also what you got to factor in.
Well, and I think linebacker is a weakness, so it'll be interesting to see how much run he gets there. But it is kind of interesting, too, that the Titans are cornering the market on safeties or linebackers who used to be safeties. Because you got Otis Reese, James Williams, and Jamal Adams now, assuming Jamal Adams sees some run at linebacker. That's a lot of safety turned linebackers for one roster. But I don't know. I'll be interested to see how they use him, and if he can get some of the pass rush stuff back, I think he could be a useful weapon for them and maybe give them some run defense on early downs and things like that. But as far as an every down player, I do not want to see him in that role. I don't think he can play that anymore. He cannot cover people. period.
We got a Ricky bomb, pretty Ricky bomb. If you're interested in it,
yeah,
rumor in all caps. Rumor: the Raiders are a team interested in trading for Brandon Ayuk. Ayuk knows Antonio Pierce from the Arizona State days. Here's the fun part: the Raiders would send Davante Adams to the Niners in any trade. Davante has no real money on his deal after this season. Just to throw that out there.
I saw that.
That would be the one trade that I think would actually benefit the 49ers. I don't think there was another trade out there that actually does benefit the 49ers because Brandon Ayuk is so important. I cannot believe people do not understand how important Brandon Ayuk is. And I think receiver probably skews that a little because a lot of Deebo Samuel talk is, of course, he's one of the receivers. But Brandon Ayuk does so much that goes untalked about. Brandon Ayuk is the better wide receiver than Deebo Samuel. You've heard it here first. I will say 100%. That until I die.
I don't think it's any question that he's better. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the other safeties now. I want to get your take on this because I do not agree with this, and I have no clue where this came from. But PK says they have no safety with speed. He says Amani Hooker's not a speed guy. Elijah Molden's not a speed guy. But Amani Hooker is pretty damn athletic. He's got a pretty high RAS score. He's got a pretty good 40 time and splits and stuff. He's pretty fast. Right? Am I imagining things?
Yeah, I mean, he's not a burner, but I mean, he ran 4.48. That's fast for a safety. Yeah. Like safeties generally are not 4.3 guys. Like that's rare. That's a corner.
And his
you can run 4.3. He's like
corner. You want, right? Like you want your explosives, and he's like got a 37 vertical if I'm not mistaken, which is pretty damn good for a safety.
Yeah, 37-inch vertical.
I thought that made me almost type into the show. Like, is PK smoking his weed early this morning or something? Because
I think Hooker's a good athlete. I do, but I agree that he's the only one. He's the only one in that room. He's a good athlete.
And I don't know what Matt Jackson's measurables are or anything, but you hope. And I know. Listen, I know Mello loves him some Matt Jackson. I know TD loves him some Matt Jackson. And this is nothing against Matt Jackson, but you don't want to see Matt Jackson on the field in a starting role on this defense at all. Like I just don't think you want that. Yeah. He's a great story, great special teamers, and you need special teamers on the field. But if Matt Jackson sees the field, we're in trouble. But I want to talk about Amani Hooker's usage. And, Kyle Hamilton didn't really play in the box a lot last year. That was one of the things. That was kind of one of my other annoying things was how many people said, well, Jamal Adams could just be used as Amani Hooker or as Kyle Hamilton. Yeah. I'm like, well, Kyle Hamilton only lined up in the box 22.2% of the time. And so, like, it wasn't like he was in the box all the time like Jamal Adams will be, who's in the box like 60 to 70 to 80%. And it's like they're trying to build Kyle Hamilton in the aggregate is how what's his Stoney put it is like he's trying basically every safety has one trait from Kyle Hamilton, but I do think that Amani Hooker is probably the closest on this team to someone being the Kyle Hamilton-esque player. So where are you at on what Amani Hooker is in this defense? Is he just going to be a deep, a safety that's just lined up deep, covering over top whoever may get past one of the corners? Because obviously when you press a lot, you could get, burned here and there. That's just what he is going to be now with maybe some box play?
Yeah, to me, it depends on whether they sign another safety or not, right? Like, because apparently, there's the door's not totally shut on Justin Simmons or Quandre Diggs. Either one of those guys would change for me kind of the calculus because those guys are still athletic enough. Neither one of them are burners either, but they're athletic enough to play deep middle, to play up in the box, to cover linebacker or to cover tight ends, to be able to do some of the things that you want Amani Hooker to be able to do, and he can do. But if you go and get one of those guys, then I think it's an interchangeable safety setup like we've come to expect from the Titans during the Mike Vrabel era, where both guys are going to play both roles, and it'll be kind of a flexible defense to where you're not tipping how you're going to rotate your coverage based on the alignment of which safeties where, right? So I think that's valuable, and I think they would love to be in that spot. And Molden probably can do a little bit of that. He's maybe you want him to be the 40 on as far as playing deep middle on a 60-40 split between him and Hooker, but he could do enough of it to credibly be able to play him there. So I don't know. I kind of think Hooker likely is kind of still your preferred deep middle guy, but plays a little bit in the box too. I don't think they're ever going to have true free and strong. Say that's a really kind of a relic of the past, anyways, for the entire league. But that's kind of where I see it breaking out.
Yeah, I see Amani Hooker kind of getting back to his playmaker form where he had with Kevin Byard back there, in the sense that there's going to be more opportunities for him to probably make plays on the ball this year. I don't think it's going to be anything like, a 18 or like an 8 interception season or anything, but I do think that Amani Hooker will get back on track with Denard Wilson. And because I do think the corners help, the safeties. Like the corners are, we keep coming back to the corners, and we'll talk about the corners, later on in the season, but it's just like the corners are just so good. I just keep coming back saying, well, the D-line rotation kind of sucks, but the depth behind the D-line rotation, the depth at, edge kind of sucks. The safeties are kind of hit or miss, and the linebackers kind of hit or miss. But damn, those corners are pretty that's a fucking elite trio that could really change what we think about what these other guys can do. Like, I feel like it allows... I think what it does is that allows Denard Wilson to scheme up different situations where maybe you don't notice that Jack Gibbons is like 3 steps behind, Colt Kmet, or you don't notice that Jamal Adams is is getting juked out of his shorts. Like, I think there are certain things that he can do now because those corners allow him everything. And that's why Buck phrased the question today is like, do the Titans need a safety, right? Like, do the Titans need a safety? They don't need to sign another safety. They don't need to. Now, you may want them to, but I still contend that they don't need to. But I think that this defense could benefit from getting Elijah Molden. Like, if Elijah Molden and James Adams are your chess piece, dime, defensive backs, that's pretty good. But then when you talk about it, and I still believe that Elijah Molden is an average starter, but whenever you can go from average to above average, you should take the chance to do it. That's just kind of where I'm at. And I don't know if Quandre Diggs technically is above average or better than Molden, but I'm willing to be open to the idea that at least he's better competition for Molden, and let the best man win. Like, that's kind of where I'm at that other safety situation. It's just kind of like, let the best man win. And I like him and what kind of role do you envision for Molden if he's not a speed guy, but you like him as a safety? I mean, I think basically cover the tight ends. He's a good, technically sound guy that we have seen match up on tight ends pretty well and be able to do things. He's also a guy capable of blitzing, but he's able to do things and make up for his lack of athleticism. Because I think that's the key, is that safety is about as a cerebral and about timing, about the mental game, just as much as it is about being physical and being athletic. And I think that sometimes safeties that have the smarts and have the timing and can put themselves in good position to make a play are maybe even just more valuable than just having a pure athletic guy. Like, having just a Jalen Simpson, he's the first he's the super athletic cornerback that comes to mind. Is Geno Stone and Elijah Molden have similar measurables. They have similar athletic traits and similar measurables. Now, again, I'm not saying that Elijah Molden is going to be Geno Stone, but I'm just showcasing you a name and a role that Elijah Molden can fill, as long as it all clicks between the ears, and there's no reason to ever think that Elijah Molden doesn't have that. It's one of his best attributes. That's just kind of where I'm at on Elijah Molden.
Yeah, I think Molden. Well, for one, I think Quandre Diggs is 100% better than Elijah Molden. I don't think it's close. Quandre Diggs has like 15 interceptions in the last 4 years. And has been a really good player, 3-time Pro Bowler. Good safety. Not elite, but very good. So I think without question, Diggs or Simmons is an upgrade over what they've got and would relegate Molden to backup rotational role. I mean, Molden, he's almost best if he can be allowed to float, because I worry about his size against tight ends, just because he is so small. To be covering guys that run 6'4", 6'5", and 260 pounds, stuff like that. I mean, it's tough for him not to end up getting boxed out or just out physicaled in those kind of matchups. So to me, I think a guy that can, his best role is kind of being allowed to roam and make plays, like in that safety role, which I think is kind of an ideal fit for him. And I do think he would be fine. Like, they don't have to make an addition there to be okay. I think to be good, they probably do need to make him an addition, because as much as I like Amani Hooker, he's not elite either. He's good, not elite. He's also injury prone. I mean, you're almost guaranteed to see him miss, at least a 3 or 4 game stretch of the season. So what happens when Amani Hooker's down, and then you've got Elijah Molden and Jamal Adams and the Matthew Jacksons and whatever of the world. I mean, that to PK's point, that becomes an extraordinarily slow group of safeties. And that's a problem, right? So, like, you can't have that whole position group hanging by one Amani Hooker hamstring. So I don't know. I think if they start the season with this group, it's okay. It's not a strength by any means, but could they get by with this group of corners and everything else in a better scheme, hopefully from Denard Wilson? Sure, I think you could. But do I want to find out what happens if that depth gets tested at all? No, I don't. And would I feel really great about it? Definitely not. Yeah. And that's kind of where I come down on a lot of these spots on defense.
Elijah Molden was better than Quandre Diggs last year. Just want to throw that out there, but that's okay. I understand what you're saying. You want to use.
I mean, the bulk of
you throw away Jamal Adams' past, and you're using.
Quandre Diggs is 1 year removed from being a Pro Bowl safety. Jamal Adams is 4 years removed from being a Pro Bowl safety.
Just a fun fact, he played 1,155 snaps last year in 2023. In 2022, he played 1,156. I don't know, just random musing in my head. I'm just like, oh, that's almost playing that close to almost the same exact snaps back to back is just kind of wild.
And Diggs has also been extremely healthy over the course of his career. Like, he's missed, I think, one game in the past 7 years.
I was about to say 4 1,000 snap seasons, the last 4 in a row. But he is 31. So
yeah. I mean, he's reaching that Bayard point where I think he's starting to slow down a little bit.
Does he solve your speed problem though?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't.
Yeah.
And neither does Simmons either. I mean, like they don't have. There's not that guy on the market that really is a super athlete at the safety pod. There's good safeties, but none of them are leading with athleticism, I wouldn't say.
I don't think it's as clear as day that Diggs would beat Elijah Molden, but I do think that way for Justin Simmons. And I think that's why I think Justin Simmons also thinks that way about Justin Simmons, which is why he's not signed. What would you, did the pre-Jamal Adams safety group and the post-Jamal Adams safety group, was there a big change in your grade for the depth of the overall group? Like, are you talking like they probably went from a D- to a D+? Or are you talking like they went from a C- or to a B+? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the depth went from F to, I'll say, like, I don't know, D- or D+, maybe. We'll say D+. D+.
Still, that's a big jump. I just wondered how big,
but it's not failing anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. If they signed Quandre Diggs, where do you go from there? Is that like the second best position room on this defense?
probably, which is it's a low bar. It's a low bar, unfortunately.
It's a very low bar.
So yeah, I would say
Yeah,
it becomes the second best position on the defense, and your defensive backs are going to have to carry the whole team if you sign Diggs or Simmons.
yeah. At the end of the day, week 1, your 4 safeties on this team are going to be who?
I'm gonna say they do end up signing one of these guys.
Okay.
I'm gonna say it's Justin Simmons, Amani Hooker, Jamal Adams, and Elijah Molden, which would be a great group. I'm shooting for the stars.
You are shooting for the stars because PK this morning on Robbie and Rexro was like, yeah, I don't think this is gonna happen unless all safeties come out healthy after training camp. Probably Justin Simmons is not signing for less than what he's wanting currently. But I do think that Quandre Diggs, Jamal Adams, they have a history together. I mean, I could see the reason why, and I believe. Let me check something. I believe that Quandre Diggs and 2 seasons with Brian Callahan, Quandre Diggs they crossed paths over Detroit. So another little connection. The NFL loves its connections and relationships. So I'm going bold. You went bold one direction. I'm going bold the other direction. That is Jamal Adams it's Amani Hooker, Elijah Molden, Jamal Adams, and Mike Brown are your 4 safeties that are on this team. But I would say that Quandre Diggs is probably the most likely scenario. I do think they probably sign and end up with Quandre Diggs.
I would be super excited about that. That would be great.
It would be good. Yeah, I know that he's not better than Elijah Molden, but sometimes it's better to have 2 average players than 1 average and 1 below average player. So there you go. That's where I'm at right there. Anything else you want to talk about from this safety group? Anything else? I mean, we hit Jamal Adams, we talked to Amani Hooker, we talked to Elijah Molden, talked to free agents. Is this the Shaheem Carter breakout year? I've been waiting on it for 2 seasons. The past 2 years. He's such a good preseason player. I just don't understand why he never makes the team.
He has had some good preseasons. I mean, look, like that. I think the door's wide open for somebody to step up and earn a role. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know. I guess I have a hard time getting real excited about this group as it pertains to the current players on the roster, just because, I mean, I think Amani Hooker is still the guy that I like the best out of this group. And he's obviously, I mean, he is kind of what he is at this point in his career. So
you think so? You don't think that it's maybe a little bit schematically, it's just something wasn't right last year or the last 2 years, along with injuries? Like, I kind of feel, I know there's some people said that Amani Hooker would for sure get cut. There are people that think that Elijah Molden is going to get cut. And even if they sign Quandre Diggs, they're not cutting Elijah Molden. Right now, they don't have to cut your average players that provide good depth. They don't have to cut Daniel Brunskill. They don't have to cut Elijah Molden. I mean, you cut guys like Malik Willis, right? Like, like those guys. You
Garrett
cut
Wallow.
your Garrett Warlow, who can flat out play. Your Luke Giffords. Like, you get rid of those guys. You don't get rid of the good quality depth because someone's bound to get injured, and then you would need Elijah Molden.
The Titans don't have any good quality depth to begin with.
Right. So you can't get rid of the good depth players, not maybe position groups, but you can't get rid of the good depth players because you may need them. Like, if you sign Quandre Diggs and cut Elijah Molden, you've just created the same issue you had before signing Quandre Diggs.
Yeah,
like,
you're still playing Matthew Jackson. Yeah. I mean, and that's the problem. Like,
poor Matt Jackson's catching a lot of strays this podcast.
He is. And look, I mean, nothing against him. It's just, he's the stand-in, right? For like the guy that has 0 real NFL experience, who you don't really want to be forcing into action because of an injury at some point, early in the season. So I just think there's this natural instinct for some fans, I feel like, to just immediately say, well, if they signed this player, that must mean they're cutting one of the other recognizable names on the team. No, they need backups who have actually played football before. You can't have 22 starters, and then all the rest of the players be filled with UDFAs. Like, because I mean, that's almost what the Titans have already, with very few exceptions. But that's not a good situation. That's not what you want. You are going to have to play your depth guys, and you don't want it to be a bunch of guys who have never set foot on an NFL field before. So yeah, having good veteran depth is a very good thing, and we shouldn't be so quick to try to throw it away every time someone signs and isn't starting anymore, or whatever. Yeah, let's hold on to that depth. You never know when you might need Elijah Molden desperately.
Yeah, I agree. I just, everybody just I don't know why everybody's so quick to cut people and cut good players. I mean, average players. When I say good players, average players. But I don't like, you just created the same mess. It's like when they said that, our wide receiver depth sucks. And then, they sign Tyler Boyd, and they're like, well, we cut Treylon Burks to trade Treylon Burks away. Well, then your wide receiver depth sucks again. Like,
yeah, we want to make sure Jaquan Jackson
great.
is wide receiver 4. Yeah, that's
I
a
mean,
good
he's
situation.
not a great option either, but like, it creates the same, you're creating the same issues that you've complained about. You got to understand, injuries happen. They happen all the time. Sometimes they happen often to players like Jamal Adams. Sometimes they don't happen that often at all. And, just, you can't improve your depth that take one step forward and 2 steps back. Like, then you're just in the same place. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
And I will say that's part of the reason why I do think they'll sign someone, because it's hard for me to believe that they're going to go into a season where, I mean, you really play 3 safeties, right? Like, even if they don't play as much dime as they did under Vrabel, they're going to play some. That guy's going to play in the defense, even if there's not injuries.
Sometimes you play 3 safeties and 2 cornerbacks, right? Like, it doesn't have to be in nickel. That could be your nickel formation.
Yeah, you can run some big nickel, and even PK mentioned that as like Adams potentially being the big nickel, which, by the way, one other thing, a lot of people assume that if Adams is the guy that's in the nickel spot, that McCreary's going to the bench. I don't think McCreary would go to the bench. I think out of the 3, I think it would be Awuzie who likely goes to the bench in favor of McCreary bumping outside. I just think McCreary's
here's what I'll tell you about that. I don't want to see a big nickel package then.
I don't want to either, because I don't want a situation where Jamal Adams is going to be.
I think you're put Jamal Adams in the slot against a slot wide receiver, and then putting Roger McCreary on the outside. You're putting 2 players just in really bad positions that aren't really good for them.
I think the only way that they would run that package would be against 12 personnel, where you were not going to have a slot receiver for Jamal Adams to cover. You'd have a tight end, hopefully a slow-footed tight end with little movement skills. But
Jeff Swain still in the league for Jamal Adams to cover.
Exactly. Yeah. The Swain would be a great matchup for Jamal Adams. But I think, going back to where I was headed with that, that's part of the reason I think they've got to sign somebody is you've only got 3 safeties on the roster that have played any NFL football, really. And all 3 of those guys, Amani Hooker, Jamal Adams, and Elijah Molden, have basically been made out of paper mache for the last 3 years. Like, all of them have missed multiple games pretty much every year. You cannot go into the season with those 3 being your only safeties. I know you can technically. It just seems like a pretty dangerous plan if you're wanting to contend.
And that's not a knock on Roger McCreary, the slot cornerback, but there is a stark difference between Roger McCreary, the outside cornerback, and Roger McCreary, the slot cornerback.
I don't think he's that bad outside. I don't think he's that bad. He's not as good as he is in the slot, but I don't think he's that
not
bad.
as good as Cheeto outside. So, like, I mean, that's my issues. Like, you're taking 2.
I think McCreary is a better cornerback than Cheeto.
Outside corner? Because, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, kind of like overall. I think he's a better slot corner than Cheeto is an outside corner. I'm willing to go up with you on that. I'm willing to ride that far with you. But then you're going to have to drop me off to he's a better outside corner.
Yeah, we'll drop you off. It's okay. I'll continue on into the deep end with my Roger McCreary love.
Okay. Stupid, but yeah, not you. On YouTube. He goes, is it unfair to consider a player on a $1.5 million contract to play half the snaps and get a few tackles for losses a high reward? Yes. I get what he's saying, but also that to me is just a medium reward. Like, unless you're talking about a lot of, like I find that very average, which is fine. I mean, that's fine to have an average player, but that's just my opinion. Where do
Yeah.
you stand on that before we sign out?
Yeah, I'll say that I just think a few tackles for loss just isn't that valuable. Like it's
It's nothing that it's nothing that you specifically get Jamal at. Like, you couldn't find someone else to fill that role to get those few tackle for losses. That's a very and maybe there's a way that we can maybe talk about this maybe later when we do a like our preseason preview. Maybe talk about what you would consider a high reward, medium reward for Jamal Adams. So we'll do that later. That's a good idea. I'll write that down. That will do it for us. We actually are getting out of here with a little bit under an hour of us bloviating about safety. So look at that. Look at that. He's Mike Herndon. Go read paulkarski.com. Subscribe over there. Read about some more insight and inside information on Jamal Adams and where the Tennessee Titans stand with the safety position. You can also read Mike Herndon's peer comparables. How do you want to call that of the Titans roster?
Yeah, basically breaking down where the Titans roster stacks up as far as elite players at their positions compared to other teams around the NFL. It's not good.
If you theinbox.com, you can read all about Jamal Adams, all about providing context to prior seasons, context to what he will be, the contract, all that stuff. Stackingtheinbox.com. A lot of information on Jamal Adams. And, of course, on Friday for Film Friday with stackingtheinbox.com. He has watched, I think, 4 or 5 games of Jamal Adams in 2023 and has come to the conclusion of how the Tennessee Titans will use him, which he came to that before PK's article as well. I got the receipts to prove it. So pretty much the inside information the information that stackingtheinbox.com was providing you is the same information that was given to PK by the Tennessee Titans. So that's a big win for stackingtheinbox.com right there, in my opinion.
Very nice.
So,
Very nice.
Make sure you subscribe to watch that. 440 Sports. Go listen to all the podcasts on the 440 Sports Network. We had a really good discussion about the Tennessee Titans last Thursday with the Hot Read podcast boys over at Memo's Kitchen in Mount Juliet. You should go check that place out and eat some food. Best Mexican food in the greater Nashville area, including Nashville. It's fantastic. And listen, I don't get paid to say it, so that's how much you should take my word to the bank on that. But we do get paid to talk about Bluegrass Beverages, but I also shop there all the time. Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, Tennessee. 50 years of business. You don't stay in business for 50 years without being pretty damn good at your job, because you got to pay the bills to keep those lights on. The only way to pay the bills is sell some beer, liquor, and wine and all kinds of good stuff. And they have everything that you could want over at Hendersonville at Bluegrass Beverages. For Mike, I'm Zach, and this has been Football and Other F Words, and you have just been effed.